Hey there, welcome to episode 107 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 7:21 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Greater Vegas on Wednesday, November 26, 2025. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving for this year, and I got into other things that distracted me from completing my preparations for today's episode until later in the day, so here we are. If you were pining away waiting for the episode of Quaggling Sand to publish during this holiday week, I will apologize. If you're listening to this in the distant future, that is to say, if you are listening to this and this tardy posting is in the distant past for you, don't worry about it. The title and topic today, social tech. And by that, I mean mostly social networking, some social media since they've kind of blended together a little bit. But just some thoughts over the years as it has evolved. And I think taken huge steps back, or maybe it's evolving and people are taking big steps back. I'm not sure. Could be both. But if you're not familiar with the Quaggling Sand audio program, Quaggling Sand is a term I coined when I was very young. You probably call this condition pins and needles, the return of circulation to your limb, perhaps, that you were sleeping on or sitting on. That numbness turns into quaggling sand, of course. It's actually, well, for the purposes of this audio program, it is a collection of stories, recollections, thinking back, maybe entertaining, maybe useful, maybe even educational. Who knows? Who can say? But usually no guest. That has been true for 107 episodes so far. So I don't see that changing. Somebody wants to come on and like kibitz my storytelling, I guess. That would be probably annoying. But for the most part, this is audio essays, solo, and maybe they're entertaining, maybe they're not. You be the judge. Episode 107 already. Season 2, by the way. I gotta fix that. Season 0 started with episode 0. Season 1 started with episode 53. Season 2 started with episode 105. So here we are. Episode 107 on the 26th. Happy Thanksgiving. So hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're actually able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a summary, which I'll read to you, and the links for today's episode. And there are several, but they're all referenced, so you may be familiar with some of these items. You don't really need to check them, but I should complete the journey sometimes with a few references that people can follow up on. So that's that. I need to pause for one moment. Okay, we're back. That probably didn't sound like anything to you because I paused. But okay, we're back. So the show notes, the summary, one big sentence, the links, and then we'll get into the show on this evening recording session. So here we go. The summary is social media and worse, social networking, have become completely corrupt and empower laziness and contempt and worse, all for the sake of platform owners and profit. The rich get richer, and people keep typing in whatever they're typing and being angry at each other. That was some ad lib. Luckily, we still have an email and a few other. We still have email and a few other things from the good old days. And I am not alone in thinking we should be swinging back in that direction, which is good, in my opinion. The links for today's episode. First, the Quaggling Sand homepage. Can't talk today. Quaggling Sand, no punctuation. Quaggling is QUOGGLINGSAND. If you found this episode, hopefully you did know how that was spelled. Probably won't find it in a dictionary yet. quagglingsand.com. As I always tell people, it's probably ugly when you're looking at this, and we'll touch on that at the end. It all works. I had to renew my certificates on the 20th, but I didn't do that until the 21st because it was whoops, I forgot. So I need to automate that. But yeah, everything's fine. You can find episodes there. I need to put the entire catalog on there, so I'm not totally dependent on Spotify, which is sort of the point of this episode. Although I don't talk about social media too much, more social networking. The profile page linking everything, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. It's been there for 5 years. You don't have to spend any money there. You don't actually have to buy me a coffee. There are some affiliate links towards the bottom for products I actually use. There are links to all of my audio programs and where they are on YouTube, their homepages as appropriate. It's good for that. And it is free for me. And again, you don't need to spend any money. So I keep it. I use it. Ko-fi.com is still in use, by the way. The Coffee Solo audio program, I think published twice last week. And I need to get an episode out on a few things, maybe tonight or tomorrow morning. But Coffee Solo is still there. It's linked. It's linked on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo homepage, profile page. If you've noticed over the past few weeks, I've tried to cut down on the number of self-promotion links for my other programs. I still talk about it, but there are fewer links, so there are a few specific things to talk about. Now then, for today's episode, you can, I think, yes, they are all Wikipedia links. And I've noticed that Wikipedia is looking for, they're having a Wikipedia-thon, trying to raise money. I like Wikipedia. I always say it's a good place to begin your journey, trying to learn stuff, learn new things. It's good. I think it's great for referring to things like this. I don't have to worry about, is this a good website? Is it a bad site? We all know Wikipedia is okay. It's not great. It's not perfect. Occasionally it will be politicized. They usually try to stamp that out. So because it can be edited by people out in the world, every once in a while something gets through. But for the most part, I found Wikipedia to be generally good quality. I use it quite a bit to refer people to. They are not necessarily references in the same, like not a bibliography reference collection or footnoted references more than, or so much as it is a place to begin. Yeah, that was I think that made my point. So treat all these links as the beginning of a journey if you're curious about these things that I will mention. So social networking service, and I'm just going to read them off. Wikipedia. There you go. Social networking service, that's about the notion of connecting people who don't know each other usually. Social media, the description of social media really does blend social networking and social media together. While that did stand up in court recently with the Facebook antitrust lawsuit, which I will mention towards the end of this episode, I'm not going to go into that too much, but they basically bought the competition instead of competing with them. So that raised some antitrust concerns. This was when Facebook bought Instagram, though. Does anyone have any kids that are older than that? They're all pretty much younger. It was a while ago. So they finally, I don't think they settled. I think they basically dropped it, or they said, the whole world has changed since then. The suit alleged that the competition was a website called MeWe and a site called Snap, which was really called Snapchat at one point, but then it became Snap. MeWe is gone. So the notion of social networking sites and social media sites somehow being differentiable is tricky. They still are. For example, Spotify, if you're listening to this on Spotify, it does have comments, but it doesn't really promote the notion of conversation and forum style interactions and whatnot. Whereas YouTube does. YouTube has threaded replies, and it has the notion of having a conversation and real-time chat for their live streams, right? So you can have actual people having conversations that have nothing to do with the video. So social media does have a social networking component in it. Social networking now has, you can post pictures and videos. So they've kind of crossed over into one big smelly mass. But I do still like the notion of being able to post or publish a blog post, so text or a picture or a video or an audio program like this one, and other people being able to access it. So you basically are still enabling self-publishing. So I have news for you. Social media is essentially what the internet was designed for. Social networking was why the internet was launched, but it wasn't for the same type of social networking as now. And we'll touch on that a little bit. But, the ARPANET was for connecting research facilities and universities initially, a small set initially, but most, if not all, academic institutions have pretty good internet connections to share files, to connect with people, to have conversations and so on. the modern versions of those are fine, but that all started in the old days, in the late 70s, and then in the early 80s. And the underpinnings of the things we use today are all based on those early technologies. So, social media and social networking themselves are fine. It's the way that they have been corrupted, twisted, and reshaped into horrible profit-making devices that I find detestable. But there is a way out, luckily. So I'm going to comment on my own journey, I suppose. There's a page on Wikipedia, of course, go figure. Dead social media. It's actually the list of defunct social networking services. So these are dead social media websites. And I wasn't sure what I would find when I opened the page, but they're all there. They're all there. I was trying to remember one site I had signed up with. It was called Jaiku. Strange name. That probably didn't help it. Google Buzz is on there. Just the whole collection. Orchid, Friendster. One of my favorite websites of all time, FriendFeed. Since I'm not going to talk about that too much, FriendFeed was this generalized aggregator. So you could have my Amazon wish list and my Twitter feed and whatever was public on Facebook at the time. So you could basically connect people's various publications from out on the internet, mostly on commercial websites, right? Amazon, Twitter, Facebook. But if you had an RSS feed, if you had a blog that you published somewhere, maybe it was on Blogger or wherever. So basically you could follow a person and you could collect all these things. I thought it was a great idea. It was extremely well executed. It was fun is not the right word, but it had high utility, and it was nice to be able to see what people were up to in general, if that's one way to do it. And so Facebook bought them and killed it. So of course, so there's nothing that FriendFeed was doing that a person couldn't do and publish their own stuff, which is, of course, I'm not going to link to it because I link to it too much, but publish on your own site and then syndicate everywhere. I could publish all of those things at danhugo.com, for example. Maybe I will if I get around to it. And then you could read those things, right? So there's no reason to have a service do it. It's a question of, if people enjoyed that, they could just do it, and they wouldn't have to hand over that control to FriendFeed for it to be bought up by Facebook. They could just do it. And then no one could buy it because you're doing it. So that'll be the theme of today's episode, by the way. Dead social media. Go and just flip through there and see how many of those things you signed up for and wasted your time and energy, or decide whether the winners that we have today are really losers. Is Twitter really that good? No. Even if you rename it, it's still awful. Blue Sky is also not good. I've kind of thrown in the towel on that one too. Usenet, the Wikipedia page for Usenet News. You may have experienced Usenet News in its very earliest form, like RN on your school's mainframe. That stood for Read News. There was TRN, the Threaded News Reader, Threaded Read News. There was, what else? At some point, Google acquired, there was a website called Deja News, which would print the stuff that you would find normally in a little terminal window using RN or TRN. They would create web page content. So you could read news, but in your web browser. So it was a little bit more visually friendly, easier to find links to the next article or the next news group, etc. So the user interface was nice. So Deja News, DEJA News, bought up by Google and turned into Google Groups, and then for the most part diminished. So that's unfortunate. But Usenet is still around. Usenet, we'll talk about this later. Usenet was kicked off in 1980. So if you find mailing lists, which are very similar to news groups, if you find Facebook or anything with a news feed, your wall, as they used to call it, anything where you have like a stream of titles, subject lines, topics, whatever, and then you have people commenting back on them, so you have possibly threaded the comments in a YouTube video, etc., etc. These are all basically variations on this theme. They're not necessarily copying Usenet. There was just this notion, we could actually send stuff out to people and then they can comment on it and other people can see their comments and other people can reply to those comments, threaded, ... There you go. IRC, the Internet Relay Chat, was launched in, I think it was 1988. We'll get to that later, but I'm just introducing it here. It's in the Wikipedia page and I refer to it. So IRC is real-time chat, internet relay chat. So anything where you were typing into a little window anywhere and someone else was responding immediately, you could send one character. Eventually you could send emoji. Before they had emoji characters, you could send the, I can't remember what they called it, but they were the semicolon dash parentheses, right? So little faces. So the precursors to emoji artwork. And so all that was possible back then. You could respond to things immediately. You could have conversations. You could leave your IRC window open forever. I use IRC occasionally. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think it could make a comeback fairly easily. Sorry, got lost for a second. My IRC account, you can chat with me if you want. If I'm online, which I usually am not online because I forget, because I don't have like auto launch. But I am Hugo, DHUGO at irc.libera. irc.libera.chat, internet relay chat. There are various internet relay chat client programs out there. I use, what is this called? It's Pidgin, Pidgin. I was trying to remember how you spell it. It's not Pigeon, even though their icon is a bird. It's not Pigeon, Geon, Pidgin, but that's it's free software. The point I'm making is that you could chat with me on Pidgin right now. You don't have to sign up. Well, you have to create a nickname, but you can chat with me anytime. What was it called? There was a different platform like 3 years ago that somehow went rogue and everybody went, okay, we're moving to Weber chat, this one. So there was a little bit of a scuttlebutt there, but if you look at the Wikipedia pages, there's even a little bit more scuttlebutt over the years. But the point is, you can create a live chat completely for free anytime you want, and you and your friends can create a channel and you can have a conversation, and then you can just all disappear. You don't need to have your real names. You don't have to worry about when you're running for president, people digging up your old IRC channel. maybe depending on who you were talking to. But yeah, these things are all, and so Twitter, the big Twitter hook was it connected people via SMS text messages. So it basically enabled threaded text messages without having to rely on MMS. You can get the same effect with MMS, but now you can do the equivalent of sending a text message to millions of people. That was really not possible. So the notion of, I can send a text of where I'm eating lunch, and it was launched at South by Southwest. So the hook again was, I can send a text as if I was sending text to a friend, like, hey, meet me at the whatever, this show is about to start, this band is playing, this presentation is on, whatever is going on. But you could just send it out to the world, and then other people might say, I didn't know that show was happening, or I didn't know you were here, I didn't even know you were in town. So it enabled a kind of a random discovery, which is valuable. But of course, it gets corrupted very quickly. It's unfortunate. So a discovery mechanism, and there have been similar discovery mechanisms. There was like Banjo, which was a Vegas startup that would try to pull information from various social network feeds, almost like FriendFeed, but it would try to provide you real-time updates of events, news events and other types of events. And Fox News had the big, they called them the big ass screens, I think it was. But no, big ass displays. I think that's what it was. They were these giant touch screens, and they were behind the talking, the host of a show, the anchor, sort of. What was that guy's name? Totally spacing on his name. But they launched these giant displays, and they were powered by Banjo. So that Banjo was basically trying to find real-time conversations or announcements or whatnot on social networking platforms, where people would announce these things in real time. So interesting idea. The founder of Banjo was sort of, today he would have fit right in. Let's just say he had the wrong tattoos and he was a weird guy. Anyway, I met him, but, so these things have been around. Every time something new comes along, it's like, which old things were combined to make this new thing? BBS, that's the real beginning of all this. even though the internet, the ARPANET, was forming in the 70s, I don't know if it was in the 60s, I didn't look this up, but I don't remember. But it formed a while ago to share data between RAND and MIT and whoever else. So normal people were kind of left out of the loop for a while. But BBSs, bulletin board systems, were launched, and they would enable you to take your acoustic modem, probably stick it on with little suction cups on your classic desktop phone with the handsets. You stick one little suction cup on not little teeny tiny ones for microphone recording. No, you would stick this little thing that looked like a funnel. Stick one over the earpiece, one over the microphone, and you could get about 110 characters per second, 110 symbols per second, 110 baud. Then they would go nuts and go to 300. And I don't know if anybody really got 1200 working. Maybe 600 baud working on a phone for acoustic. That's if you had a nice cradle and a good quality handset and a nice phone and all that. So acoustic was kind of a good bridge. Didn't have much runway ahead of it. But once people were using their Hayes or Hayes compatible modems, I got mine when I was in junior high school. When did I get it? High school. I was 16. Saved up all my money for a 1200 baud modem very shortly after the 2400s came out, so I could get one dirt cheap. And I think it was still like $300. But that connected me to the world. And I was able to participate with BBS Communications, which is the first place where you could post a message and someone could reply. And most BBSs had like one phone line, one modem. So it was very slow, very for early adopters. But still, BBSs formed sort of the basis. So that was like very early person-to-person emailing style message exchange on closed mailing systems. So Usenet, IRC, and BBSs all exist today. They still exist today, but they're also the basis of many platforms that exist today that everybody clamors for and invests billions of dollars in. It's kind of crazy. And finally, impoopification. That's not the actual title. I've cleaned it up a little bit for my podcast, for those with sensitive ears. But Cory Doctorow has published a book of the same title. He created this word a couple years ago to describe the TikTok business model. I think it was word of the year at some point. It's become sort of a generally accepted and in wide use. So common usage, basically. It's probably in a dictionary near you. It's basically the 3-phase process, new technologies and platforms and services, and I would argue cities and anything goes through. They want to attract customers, so they treat the customer like they're the number one thing. That's phase 1. Phase 2, they realize, we got to make money. We got to really prefer the advertisers. So we're gonna kind of screw the customers over for the sake of the advertisers so we can make our money. In phase 3, do we really need the advertisers? We can just make money ourselves directly. And so phase 3 is like screwing over everybody for the sake of profit and satisfying investors. So that fiduciary responsibility thing is probably our undoing, the root cause. Anyway, way back when, I used to write letters with a pen and paper and an envelope and a stamp, and sometimes I would get a letter back, which was always it's like the notification on your phone, if you believe Simon Sinek. You get a little dopamine rush whenever your phone buzzes. Are people talking about me? Well, when you'd go out to your mailbox and you'd have a letter addressed to you, and it wasn't from the IRS or a bill collector or something. This is exciting. Someone took the time. How nice. Those were crazy days back then, right? To think that someone would take that amount of time. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat down and wrote a letter to someone? Even better, when is the last time you received a letter from someone? Maybe you letter back, or maybe just somebody wrote you a letter. How crazy. So whether in reply or otherwise, when was the last time any of these things happened? I bet you don't even remember. I was first exposed to digital messaging in the form of a mailbox on the Arizona Apple user group BBS, bulletin board system, that I was a part of in my junior high school days. I think it was junior high school. It might have been 6th grade. Honestly, it's somewhere in there. I've talked about that before. This was interesting, but very limited. The BBS in general was a closed system where there was not interconnectivity with other BBSs. Usually, So it was a convenience for members of a club or a group, but not truly useful outside of that club. Now, this would change with FidoNet and similar platforms. So they would, if you sent a message to somebody on another FidoNet server, they basically would sync up between servers, sort of like how Usenet works. And really, when you think about it, sort of how SendMail works now. They would say, oh, you have a message that's going to a different server. It's not to this local group. So if I wanted to send something to the Nevada Apple users group, I might send the message. It would sit on the Arizona Apple users group FidoNet connected server. And then sometime overnight, when they would all connect to each other and see who had mail for whom, my message would make its way, and that was all fine. But these were baby steps in those early days. My first practical use of email was in college, where our school computers, the HMC VAX and J. Arthur, which I've talked about in previous episode or two, were connected to the early days of the internet. There was actually still some BitNet lingering back in the late, so it was 89, 90. So I had to use alternate email addressing with exclamation points in it at some point probably in the first year. I think most of the internet that I was engaged with was transitioning pretty quickly. So we could actually communicate via email to just about any of our former high school classmates, and we could find them thanks to Finger, the Finger service, which is disabled pretty much across the board in modern times because something useful is always abused. So Finger became a privacy concern and a security concern as well. But I'm sure somebody was being humorous. You could finger a username at a server, and it would return their email address and it would read their plan file. So you could put whatever you want in the plan file. So that had to go away because it was too easy to find people that you needed to contact. There were actually a ton of protocols. Look up Gopher and WAIS, WAIS, Wide Area Information Service, and there's a couple of other ones. And then, eventually FTP and HTTP became commonplace. Gopher faded away. Netscape Navigator used to support Gopher. Those were the good old days. It was a slow start. I landed in Silicon Valley 2 months after graduation, and there was no intercompany emails in place just yet. None that I had encountered anyway at the companies I worked for. Not really, such that we at Supermac were using Apple Link to get information from Apple. We were using CCmail from Lotus, which was built to message within a company. So we didn't really have true, I can just email anyone I want. There were beginnings of intercompany or inter-server, really, email with SMTP gateways. That's Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So the gateways, I think Lotus had a gateway in their products. Lotus Notes definitely did. But it was cumbersome because nobody had really decided on a good way to prevent people from emailing company secrets to anyone in the world and all that. So, SMTP gateways, they will literally be gate-kept gateways and leave it up to the company and their policies, I suppose. So, but gateways were coming onto the scene. But a lot of us were dialing up with our modems to AOL or wherever at home, mostly closed networks when it came to email and moving files around. I used to hear people say, well, I'll just go home and email it from home. It's easier. It's easier for me to send stuff. I think I had my Netcom account fairly early. So I could dial into netcom.com. They had point of presence or POP phone numbers all over the country. So it was usable, and you could use an email client there and so on. So I was dhugo at netcom.com, and then I got sick of Netcom, so I got an account on Best. So I was dhugo at best.com. So if you had a modem and you were willing to put up with some of the quirkiness of those early days, you could send email. I could send email to and from my personal email account. Not so easy in the workplace just because of paranoia, I suppose. Most of it legitimate, probably. Somewhat interesting, Usenet started in 1980 and IRC launched in 1988. These are basically the underpinnings of most social networking platforms we see today. These were experiments in the early days. Commercialization of these ideas led to various versions of similar ideas. Most are listed on the defunct social network list that I referred to earlier. Don't forget the venerable BBS, which was founded first in Chicago in 1978 with classic acoustic modems enabling slow information sharing in what one might call the beginning of the beginning. those were, so anyone who uses Slack, do you use Slack? Slack, yay. What is Slack? Well, you have Slack channels, and you can, invite people to join channels. You have your username, so you are addressable. You can have private conversations. You can, what else? You can share files and stuff. Have you ever used the / command on Slack? Well, funny enough, IRC has / commands, has channels. You have individual one-to-one conversations. So Slack, as someone once described, Slack is IRC with animated GIFs or emoji or whatever that little visual flourish that has grown over the years. But IRC is chatting with people and chatting with multiple people in channels or chat rooms. If you were on AOL, you probably encountered chat rooms. If there were ICQ was another one. So these platforms that evolved from this were very much about people communicating with others whom they did not know, or maybe knew through work or whatever, similar interests, similar geographical locations, whatever it was. You could build channels for anything. You can create channels. You invite people to participate. So yeah, these things have been around for a while. Usenet, very much like a mailing list. The interface for it is very similar. You're basically sending a subject line with a thing that you want to talk about. And then there are news groups that are very much like channels. So you could have like, what's the ComSys computers, computer programming, Python or whatever. So the news groups have this naming structure and all this. And so, I want to hang out in this news group. I want to talk about programming or Nevada life or Las Vegas gambling tricks, whatever. You could create news groups pretty easily, and then it was almost like emailing, and then you would see responses, and it was a threaded perhaps. So very, very similar to an email experience. So nothing really too crazy. The mechanism of sharing that information, decentralized, Usenet peering servers. I would have a server, you would have a server, probably not individuals, but every once in a while we would swap our news group content. So we would synchronize all of our news groups so that you could have news feeds that were shared across many servers through this peering server network. So sort of decentralized, because if one of those servers went down, there was a very strong likelihood that all of its content was to be found on other servers and so on. So they did have an infrastructure for they called it the internet. What was it? No, the Usenet death penalty. If you wanted, they would literally cancel people. Like, you're not allowed to post here anymore. And they had quarantine lists and all that. So the good old days. The ARPANET and the really early days were driven by government research information sharing, of course, but these were these little experiments like BBSs and whatnot that made the most of the most basic modem and slow computer technologies available to individuals at the time, connected people with similar interests at small scale. Interesting, perhaps, was the fact that AOL Instant Messenger, of all things, itself very similar to IRC, was one of those early aha tools when AOL made it accessible to others outside of AOL. A story I've told before, this is how I communicated with my family back home while I was in college, thanks to the antiquated telephone switchboard still in place in 1990 at Harvey Mudd College. So we could just chat through AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, using a free tool available to the world to connect to AIM users, regardless of whether you were an AOL user. So AOL sort of opened up this chat possibility. The important part about that was we could have used IRC, but because my family was already using AOL, that was easy to sort of jump on that. Today, I would probably say we'll use IRC, although today we also just use Telegram or Signal, or you could use WeChat if you're in Asia, or Line, or WhatsApp, although you should not use WhatsApp, and so on and so on. Everything new is old. So email and all the other stuff. I really need to think about this. I had purchased my first domain while I was working in the Newton group at Apple Computer. So I can have one fixed email address. Previously, my post-college. Why did I write post-collect? I don't know. My post-college email addresses were at Netcom and Best, as I mentioned. Personal email was a thing for a while. certainly since college times, probably. I know probably most of the people that were entering college in the late 80s were getting introduced to some sort of an email system. Early 90s, definitely more so since. So by the time you got out of college, you'd have a collection of people that you were emailing with, staying in touch. Maybe you had college projects where you were emailing people. You were generally making use of the technology, even though companies may have had a little bit of reticence in the area of, information sharing and enabling these connections between offices and companies and so on. There was certainly on the personal level, email was catching on. I know I had tons of people that I would email with. Texting was not yet a thing, strangely enough. Boy, did that change. But so this was probably the way most of us were using email was personally, as I mentioned. And I heard this so many times. Oh, I'll email it from home. Or you'd get a work email, but it was from somebody's home address, which was either their university email address, .edu, or a netcom, or maybe an AOL. No, did AOL have gateways yet? AOL may have had gateway. I don't remember when that rolled out. It was AOL getting access to the internet was the big thing, but we're not going to talk about that today. That's too big. But yeah, so personal email was like in my generation, or in my part of my generation, what became like the way that you communicated with people. I think my first real intercompany email exchanges were taking place at True Vision, when we had emails going back and forth with Sony in Japan for our joint video capture project. So that was actually interesting because, we're emailing with people in Japan, and wow, this is actually quite practical. Go figure. My first experience with the internet was earlier, trying out the Mosaic browser while we were testing the Power Macintosh upgrade card back in the PowerPC transition days at Apple. So that was one or two jobs before I was working at True Vision. My friend from college sent me some sort of a message, probably to Hugo. Was it still? I think I was still using. I think I was still using Netcom at the time. Probably emailed me at Netcom because he was at grad school at UT Austin, and he said, "Hey, have you seen this thing, Mosaic?" And that was the beginning of that. So my two contract experiences at Apple. First, the testing of the Power Macintosh upgrade card as part of the Power Mac transition. That was my second job in Silicon Valley. So my first experience on the internet was making use of the Mosaic browser on extremely slow local net Apple Talk network, which was ridiculous. But I was able to see the first of the internet back then. And then when I was in the Newton Group, my first domain purchased from, I don't think it was Network Solutions yet. I think it was still the Internic. I had a NIC handle, DH1426. I bought my first domain name, reallycool.com. So that Apple was paying me for my first World Wide Web and web browser interaction experience, and then my entry into the self-determinism of my internet future. What a time. Basically, I was wading into all these things with everybody else, and there was this sense that the ability to interoperate was actually a good thing, that it was something we were seeing benefit from. So I could email you could email me. There were, in the early days of the internet, any web browser, there were only like two, but you could, the internet was open. The famous decision by an awful person, we don't need to get into, Mark Andreessen, to let the show source option continue to exist. So to enable people to learn how the internet worked, you should be able to see the source code for the pages that you were loading. So you could emulate that in your own publishing of this or that. So a lot of stuff was like, here, everybody use it. That was a good thing. The introduction of web browsing and the web in general seemed to have injected the upside of an even larger population of innovative people. So some of those things were like, news, we can just transfer messages around, and then UU encoding to transfer binary data, and later MIME, multi-purpose internet message exchange, headers, MIME types, and so on. So you could base64 encode things. So all this stuff was about being able to share content, share ideas across different platforms and so on. So it was very nice. But the web came along, opened it up to many more people, tried to make it a little bit more accessible. Small A accessible. Accessibility would be a thing that is still an ongoing challenge. But, to be able to click on things, to not remember those slash commands and all that. So you got more innovative people doing more cool things. But then the downside was the formation of silos and the associated business plans that have steered us all wrong. So it sounds like I'm just telling the story, but this is how I was growing into the internet. So email at work, email from work, personal email accounts, getting my own personal domain name. So if I change, I changed my email address to dhugo at best. What happens to all that email going to dhugo@netcom.com? Oh, well, sorry. So these little steps. And so the same thing happens. Oh, I left Twitter. How's the world going to find you? Well, you can find me on my blog. Blogs, we don't use blogs anymore. That's crazy. They shall return, perhaps. There are still blogs. There's plenty of this stuff. RSS is dead, except for the however many millions of RSS feeds are out there. If you flip through the Wikipedia page with the dead services listed, you will maybe pick out a few you signed up for. There were just so many. Every day there was some new thing coming out. And some of those services are like eWorld is listed on there. That was Apple's that was the sequel, I suppose, to Apple Link. So it was a little bit more graphically oriented. It had like a city graphical paradigm, is there a city skeuomorphism? I don't know. But eWorld's on there. I never signed up for eWorld, but basically a company BBS of sorts. Maybe Darwinian, perhaps. The platforms that did all the things the most correctly, but not necessarily entirely correctly, have survived. So what made Twitter better than Jaiku? Probably the name, probably more marketing dollars thrown behind it, more celebrities joined in. Who knows? Jaiku did not have a good name. And yeah, just some magic thing, because there was certainly a sea of options. Maybe more to it than that. Something nefarious, perhaps. But if everybody is building silos, the silos can either talk to each other or there will just be fewer silos because everybody wants to go where other people are to be found. As Mastodon has been rolling out, I think it's a 10-year-old project now, so it's been around. The big thing is, I go to Mastodon and nobody responds anything. And to me, that's good. But I got to have people listening to me, what I have to say. So they want to have instant gratification. The utility of Mastodon, or more correctly, the utility of the ActivityPub Fediverse notion, is that you don't have, the people would refer to Mastodon there are more people on Twitter than Mastodon. Well, first of all, Mastodon is 10 years old as a software project, but it's really only been on the public radar screen for half that, if that. And Twitter's been around for 20 years? So longer. So brand recognition, awareness. And then why do I want to replace Twitter? I already have all my friends there. Most of them are robots. So getting people to switch in general is a problem. We know that. Vendor lock-in, also getting people to move. I don't know. I use Facebook to keep in touch with my family. So getting people to break their habits, if you want to call them that, can be tricky. But the other thing that people will say, there's nobody on Mastodon. And my first question, when I would engage people on this, which I gave up on, well, which Mastodon server are you on? I don't know, just Mastodon. I don't know how many thousands of servers there are. There's not an official registration roll call or anything. But, we Innovate for Vegas will launch its Mastodon server at some point, mastodon.vegas, someday. There can be as many Mastodon servers as you want. They can be vertically focused, we'll probably spend our energies on Vegas-related things, or it can be general, right? I have an account on Fostodon, which I talk about programming stuff, tech in general, or I read other people's posts about that stuff. Sort of has a Usenet sort of flavor to it in that regard. So yeah, these things exist. And the reason that people get upset is that it's not exactly, I want the thing that I've already been using. Okay, keep using it. Well, but I don't like the thing I'm using. Okay, that's an argument you can't really get very far in. But the upside of a decentralized platform, so Mastodon is one, PixelFed is one, Lemmy. So people are developing these services so that they can interoperate. So I can follow you. I don't have to sign up for your platform to follow what you're saying or to interact with you. Just like email. Like, oh, you have a Gmail address. I have to go sign up with Google to get a Gmail address. Nope. No, you don't. You can send an email if you have my email address, and they interoperate. So what the Fediverse is enabling, and I've talked about this in some other episode of something, probably FFS talk. The Fediverse allows you to interoperate across different types of platforms using like a standard addressing scheme and so on. So at username, at platform. Oh, that's too confusing. Well, you got the username at platform for email. So if you add another at the beginning, you can use it as a Fediverse address for various services. And you can run your own services. So all these things are modern takes on the old way of doing things, which is like, oh, if you want to accomplish something, you should be able to. You should just be able to do it. You should be able to put up your own server, launch your own services, be accessible on the internet, and interoperate with others. That seems to be where things are going, but I digress. If you flip through that Wikipedia page, I highly recommend it just from a walk down memory lane. As I was skimming through looking to, because I couldn't remember the name of Jaiku. Hopefully I'm getting it right. But as I was flipping through it, I was like, oh, I remember that one. I remember that one. Yeah, JAIKU, microblogging and live streaming service. So live streaming, I think, has migrated to become activity streams, which is a W3 standard, World Wide Web Consortium standard. And then Activity Pub is a way of sharing and sending notifications and following activity streams. So this is all technologies that are decades old, which means they work. Is ICQ dead? House Party, I remember that one. Hive, hello. Remember Yo, that's on there. Scuttlepad, Shelfari. I remember Shelfari. Now it's probably Goodreads. 6 Degrees, Friend Feed is on there. Talent House, I don't remember what that was. So everybody, Travel Buddy, everybody had these websites, and you'd have to go sign up for one. Zonga, yeah. Everything from Yahoo. Oh, Yahoo Messenger. I remember that. Zoopy, I never heard of that one. But yeah, so surely you have old accounts. Obviously, the big one is MySpace. I think I still have a MySpace account. I think it's still on there. Every once in a while I go log in and it's still there. So that's nice. I don't use it. 43 Things was not really it was more of a social media or Notion sharing for personal goals. App.net. Wow. Kapazoo board. Anyway, so there's tons of these. I don't remember. I didn't count. Did I see the number? I don't remember seeing the number of, there's no total, but there's a lot. So back in the day, in the early days, it was really annoying. You had to sign up for yet another platform if one came out that looked even vaguely interesting. If you wanted to be found by all of the other people on the other platforms, it would be useful to have the same username. So I would, for social media, I usually go Dan Hugo, DANHUGO. So I'd be Dan Hugo at Twitter, Dan Hugo on Facebook, Dan Hugo on Zoopy, Dan Hugo on Jaiku, etc. So you go, oh, maybe that's the same person. So username, or sometimes social media networking handle, my Twitter handle, etc. Since we didn't know which ones would last, like, should I sign up for Twitter or Jaiku? Oh, 100% Jaiku would have been a bad decision for some people. So signing up for the latest platform was something of a wager. Should I sign? I guess I got to sign up for both and just see what happens. So you got to get that username secured and see where it went. So somebody on GitHub, I'm Dan Hugo, guy so nice to name me twice, because someone else already had Dan Hugo. Go figure. Luckily, my GitHub handle is not how people would find me, most likely. They'll find me through other means, like the projects I'm working on and so on. But also, the interesting thing is nowadays, it's a lot easier to just have a link that you share with people, like a V-card, virtual business card, which is structured data so that that's another version of interoperability. Most email clients of any value can parse a V-card attachment, for example, and they'll put you in your contacts with all of your links and so on. So other email addresses and whatnot. So slowly but surely, these things have sort of been addressed over time. But back in the day, it was like, oh, I got to sign up for another Dan Hugo at Goofy platform see what happens. And then they would go away. And, I haven't mentioned food trucks too much. For food trucks, they basically, and I never really understood this, they would, on their wrap for their truck, they would put icons for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook or Yelp or whatever. But they would not put the name of their food truck or their handle. And I think they would just assume, oh yeah, people will just type in my food truck name. And my favorite one, if I can remember it, no, I cannot remember it. One of it was Twisted Chill. Twisted Chill was an ice cream truck, and Twisted without chill was like a concept burrito style truck. The burrito was made in like a twisted thing, and so you just had to know one from the other. There was one truck called, what was it called? Omi Ninja, but it was not O-H. It was O apostrophe M-I. I think it was another apostrophe. Ninja. Omi Ninja. So if you didn't know how to spell that, you'd get all kinds of different spellings. And so, yeah, the thing with the handles, if you have all the same handle, but you don't tell anybody what it is, that's one challenge. But now if you have, on Snapchat, I'm this, and then on TikTok, I'm this other one because somebody already had that one. So it can be very tricky. So brand management becomes a real issue across these platforms that you have no control over. So you just have to hope for the best. And I always found that to be sort of troubling. And I wonder now how much time I actually wasted on that silliness. I'm like, I got to get Dan Hugo on the dumbest platform ever.com, because you never know. So annoying. I actually think personally, because you can change your username, and all of your messages will be still assigned to the new username because it's not by username, it's by user ID. So personally, I think user ID should be the thing that people get. Like I should be able to share my user ID with people who may want to follow it, and then they should be able to label me the way they want to. So if they want to spell Omi Ninja the way they want to, that's fine. And then if I need to change my name, I don't have to actually tell anybody. They're not going to, because the ID will remain the same. So only people that are stumbling upon my account may find it by the name that's on the side of my food truck or whatever. So basically, I think the user ID, the non-changing user ID value, should play more active a role in how people share their social network identity and whatnot. Or we should just get rid of all that crap. Guess which ones I'm in favor of. Guess which version of that. Where am I? Where I totally scrolled away from. Getting out. Okay, I found it. Hopefully that silence will be truncated away. So obviously, to me, the big problem with this whole scheme was, and still is, handing over your brand, your presence on the internet, your network, in other words, your friends, your family, your colleagues, in the form of your network connections, people following you, people liking you, all that stuff. You're handing it over to some company that ultimately wants only profit from your participation. So, end of the day, if they were not required to be concerned about your personal health and well-being and making sure you don't get doxxed and murdered and other bad things, if they didn't have to do it, they probably wouldn't. The stuff Cory Doctorow has been writing about and talking about for ages with the recent book of the same name, which was the final link in the link section today, their success comes from our misaligned goals. We are sharing and communicating and fighting, and worse, staying engaged, and the platform makes the money. And they basically need to do that above all else. So whatever it takes. The most recent thing rolling out from Twitter now, and it's not 100% effective, and they will probably get in trouble for misleading people because you can change this with VPNs and whatnot. But it will actually display where someone is tweeting from. So if you claim to be, the examples they were giving were America First Twitter handle is tweeting from Azerbaijan or wherever, right? They're not even in America. Okay. So that will be a shiny object for a few minutes, but whatever gets people attention, so they want to use your platform more, that's all that matters. We have 3 more sections. Getting in and getting out. So Facebook was the thing for a while, unfortunately. So Twitter used to be the Facebook thing. Twitter used to be the food truck thing, but then everybody started getting their Facebook page. They use Facebook, and now you got to use Facebook to find everybody. I watched someone say to a customer, like, "Oh, how do I find your truck next time?" oh, follow us on Food Truck on Facebook. Well, what if I don't use Facebook? And the person that was working on the truck just gave them the blank stare, like, because you've handed your brand over to Facebook. And so people that are not using Facebook can't be your customers, right? That's not good. At some point in my alma mater, Harvey Mudd College, was pondering an alumni portal. It was an actual alum was working at a company that was building this platform that would be, like, hey, if you're a school and you want to keep in touch with your alum, you can have this platform to, it was kind of a knockoff Facebook. More like a knockoff MySpace, but without the style sheet flexibility, but fairly basic, fairly, okay. So they were pondering that, and I tried it, and I was in the kind of the early group of like, let's take a look at this. But even I agreed at the time with the move toward a Facebook group and the page and all that other junk instead of, that was a bad decision. But so I accept the blame. It wasn't my decision, but I was supportive of it. I had signed up with my school email address to Facebook, which Mudd let us have for a couple of years after graduation. I don't know if they still do that. So I still had the Hugo at hmc.edu, I think, or jarthur.hmc.edu, I think. So that was good enough to get in at the student tier of Facebook. Eventually they started letting everybody sign up, and that was, if not the beginning of the end, certainly the middle of it. I had a couple of connections when I signed up. I mean, friends. And the journey on the wrong path commenced. I should never have gone in the door. Twitter was super popular for food trucks in the Bay Area and elsewhere. And Instagram, of course, eventually came along, and that's the new, because you can just take pictures of your food or your food truck or a map or something. Instagram famously breaks the internet since you're not so easily able to link to things. And now Facebook and Twitter and many other platforms now make it impossible to find anything on their websites if you're not already a member and signed up. So silos. So we've moved all the way to silos at this point, which is annoying. Twitter, I'm sorry. So Instagram, of course, it was fun at first, but now mostly garbage, just like all the others. So yeah, that you have to be logged in thing to get to use it. Like, I don't understand how people they just rely on the fact that, everybody must be just like me, right? All of my customers must be using Facebook and Instagram. How could they not be? Which is unfortunate. So the mindset today. Once a platform can be used for advertising, that's phase 2 of impoopification. It is mostly gone. And then it gets worse from there, as they all have, and they move to phase 3, which is they don't even care about their advertisers anymore. When I moved to Las Vegas, Facebook was the quick and easy way to connect to the various people around here. I was encountering a lot of new people downtown on my journeys through the downtown project and just getting to know the area. So Facebook was a quick way to connect with people. Not everybody was using email, but everybody had a Facebook page or a account of some sort. And then LinkedIn was the way to go to connect with the various downtown project denizens, specifically if they had a startup they were pursuing and so on. So I had a lot of cases where I would connect to someone on LinkedIn and then Facebook. So LinkedIn was, here's what I'm working on, and Facebook, here's what I'm doing, that kind of thing. I had signed up with LinkedIn in August of 2003. LinkedIn launched in May of 2003, so I was pretty early. There's another platform that is all the way into phase 3 at this point. It's mostly garbage. Twitter also. I don't even use Twitter. Not quite as much as Facebook and LinkedIn. Twitter is on phase 3. I don't know if Twitter is following those 3 phases, because Elon has sort of changed it up a little bit. I mean, it's just generally horrible. But Facebook and LinkedIn, it's all about, pay for premium services. Pay for this, pay for that. For me, I think it was the pandemic where I started to see the problem on a personal level with these social media platforms. It just became too much. People were living on Facebook instead of having human contact. That started to become bad, I guess is the word. I stopped using Facebook maybe 4 years ago now. I stopped using Twitter in maybe the same time frame. I walked away from the Instagram pile shortly after. Usually, so what I've done in general is except for Twitter, I've posted things like, I'm going to stop using this platform. So I'll post like once a month for a year or something. So I stopped using Instagram, but I really stopped using Instagram after a year of telling people I'm not using Instagram anymore. Same with LinkedIn. So I don't really post on LinkedIn anymore except for our pages, which are annoying. So horrible. So I use LinkedIn for network outreach to connect with people. But then I always tell them I really, really prefer email. So I don't really post there anymore. We do have the 2 pages, one for Innovate for Vegas Foundation and one for Cafe Genius. Basically, we have a bunch of followers, but 0 engagement. So the value is 0 to continue posting to those pages. LinkedIn is mostly connecting with people who then do not communicate. So you may as well not connect with them, or spam. Spam has dropped off precipitously, so that's good. But the value of the platform to me, 0. For what it's worth, to me anyway, I have moved to the exit and I am ready to deplane from this whole mess. Ain't that the truth? So the next thing, what is the next thing? I am personally a strong supporter of a return to the old days, if you will, where someone who wanted to put up a website could just do it. You can just do a website, make me a website, make a website yourself. They didn't have to be the latest JavaScript frameworks and whatnot. You should see some of the stuff, some of the websites that are still around from like the 80s, the late 80s, and the like FintSurf stuff. Some of them are maintained as like museum pieces, but certainly the websites from the 90s where, HTML was a new thing. People are experimenting. There's still CGI scripts running out there. I think that's the common gateway interface. So you could have server-side scripts that would run and process your email address and stick it in an email and send it for you and all that crap. But the nice thing about those days was like you could try to figure out how to do something and do it, and you'd probably come up with some new idea in the process. And it was when people started saying, well, how can we create a startup, get millions of dollars in funding that we really don't deserve, and then build a platform that we will ultimately end up stealing data from people and guaranteeing their privacy, but ultimately using that for advertising dollars and then eventually screwing over our advertisers. Like that's the path that a lot of people ended up getting on. And it's kind of sad because, the masses end up going, I didn't really want Facebook to know where I am at every moment, nor Google. Like, well, you have to read those terms of service and privacy policy. Sorry. There is so many resources though at this point. It's the 21st century now. Whether it might be hosted locally, some people have the fast enough internet connection in their home network that they can just host a site locally. You might even get a static IP address, though those are not nearly so critical anymore. You can host on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, Google Compute Platform, I think it's called, GCP, or something in between. Maybe you have a DigitalOcean or a DreamHost or Akamai, formerly Linode. I have a Linode server, like $10 a month. Countless open source platforms enabling all manner of blogs and media sharing, streaming, you name it. Protocols like ActivityPub, which we talked about earlier, for Mastodon and PixelFed and all that. Old school RSS, NNTP, the Network News Transfer Protocol for Usenet, SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, all of it just works just fine. It's still in use today, all of it. No, ActivityPub is newer, but all these things, they work behind the scenes, but they work, and they're just free. At the end of the day, the big thing is discovery. This is why platforms have sustained themselves for so long, because they show, I don't know how that worked. They show people what they think they want you to see, right? The For You page, the recommended videos, the reordered tweets. Instagram is notorious for this. So they're showing you what they think you want to see so that you stick around. Sort of like a casino layout is designed so that you can't leave. They keep the weather nice. They keep the exits far, far away. So discovery is where people that try out Mastodon, for example, say, oh, there's nobody on there. Because you're just joining the platform. There's nobody knows who you are yet. You gotta interact with people. It's like being a wallflower at a social gathering. If you're gonna lean against the wall and not talk to anybody, nobody talked to me there. Well, that's a two-way street. Because they show you what they think you want to see, and they have gotten quite good at it. So good, in my opinion, that people no longer look for their own interests. They merely accept what is presented to them. So if it wasn't in my feed, it must not exist, which is horrible. Then they monetize this during phase 2. So that your advertisers know that they have a certain audience that's very predictable. They're being fed advertising. The demographics have been identified and classified and so on. TikTok must not be banned in the United States, therefore, because too many people make money from it and many more pass their time with that platform. They don't even know where to look for anything else. Oh, TikTok, that's where I get all of my news, information, my, like everything. By the way, I've mentioned this before, I think on FFS. Everybody's predicting the demise of mainstream media, professional, commercial media, the New York Times, the CNN, all that. In some cases, that might be good, but they think, oh, I get all my news from Twitter. Well, how does that news get there? Because people are posting stories from CNN, stories from the New York Times, news outlets and so on. So I think there's this belief that we can just replace, and this is because nobody knows how these things work. Oh, we'll just replace the New York Times with Twitter. Like, no, that's right. That's like replacing, pick your favorite movie studio. We'll replace them with a big screen TV at home. Like, no, that's the thing that you use to view the productions of the company. That's not where the movie came from. So if you get rid of news organizations, Twitter will just be about far right-wing governments from the 30s. So, yeah, you can't ban TikTok because people would know what to do. It is nearly impossible. It's a nearly impossible ask to get people to leave a platform once they've made it a part of their life and they've forgotten how to do anything else. So a certain amount of pain must be accepted when leaving a platform. You must leave your friends and family behind. But here's my rationalization. And here's a question to ask yourself. Are these connections so fragile that they can only exist with a chaperoned interaction, the chaperone being Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever? Is that the necessary ingredient? Otherwise, I'll never talk to them again. Maybe you actually have a parasocial relationship with most of these people. Only online, not so legitimate. Maybe they don't even know who you are outside of seeing a news update from you every once in a while in their feed or on their wall or whatever. So what are you going to miss? Email is just as convenient as checking on Facebook. You can have a mailing list. You can have a group email. We used to have, there was a woman, her name was Julie Benson Grant, I think. She used to send out jokes at Apple because she had a little internal mailing list and it was just a bunch of CCs or BCCs. So she just maintained her own list of people who wanted to get jokes from her. So she would send out jokes all the time. That was it. That can be done. You can do that today for free. You don't have to give away your personal information to big corporations to send baby pictures or news updates. So think about that. Do you have parasocial relationships with your family? I got to use Facebook. That's what my family uses. They don't know my name, but I follow their page. Witness the new coolness, chatting mostly with generative AI models instead of actual people. This is where it's happened. I mean, this is bound to happen this way. But like, if you spend most of your time now talking and interacting with people you don't know, somehow basing your own self-worth on whether you got likes or subscribers or followers or whatever, which does happen, and then you're given an opportunity to interact with a thing that pretends to be human and convinces you that it is, and it will answer your every whim and it will tell you how awesome you are and so on. Come on, how can you go wrong? You don't even need to email anyone anymore. Now, social media is something else, in my opinion. So social networking versus social media. But they're all pretty much smashed together now, enough to get Facebook out of their antitrust suit over their Instagram purchase, as I mentioned earlier. I think social media, this is my opinion, even if you read through the Wikipedia pages, you may find that they differ a little bit. But in my view, social media is part of this drive towards new media or independent media. And hey, you are listening to me right now. I am using social media right now to share an audio program that I produce myself, and then I publish it for others to find. I publish it occasionally on a social network site like Mastodon or Innovate for Vegas has a Blue Sky account, so I'll put a link there. No engagement, but so I can use social networking platforms to share my social media publications. But my social media publications can be found by others anyway without me telling them. I do publish on Spotify, but I can also self-host or I can choose other places or multiple places. Or as I've been describing lately, I want to make Spotify the secondary. So I'll continue to use Spotify, but I want to host all of my own content as the primary point of publication, so that if Spotify ever disappears or more likely has issues, this has happened multiple times now in the past couple of months, like, oh, everything's not working. So I shouldn't depend on Spotify. I should make use of Spotify, but I should be able to function almost without interruption without Spotify. So I can self-host, or I can choose other places. So there are any number of options. As I was saying earlier, anyone can pretty much publish their own stuff somewhere, and they can probably own a lot more of it than if they just publish it on LinkedIn or Facebook or similar. And then you can post links to it, or you can post a copy. But if the originals are on Spotify or TikTok or whatever, oh, sorry, we had to cancel your account. But I had all my original. Sorry. So I can choose the other places or multiple places. And because of the decentralized nature of podcast distribution, which has kind of existed from day one, it is mostly possible to avoid the silo effects. So in other words, the RSS feed that you find on Spotify, you can also find in other places. And now, I don't think RSS has like a multi-enclosure feature. I got to check on that. I was thinking about this the other day. If I want to host my content on Spotify, but I also want to host it on my own server, so I want to have two different places you can find it. Email has this. It's called a cost value, which I think now they've renamed it because it's not really about cost anymore. So if you said, I can list 5 email servers or something. One has a cost of 1, one has a cost of 5, one has a cost of 10. So as you're looking for servers to send your email to, you could say, the cheapest one, the cost 1. But if that one's down for some reason, all right, we'll send it to cost 5. That'll be our second choice. So it'd be cool if RSS feeds had that and so on. So there's some experimentation that can happen here. So interesting times. Maybe people are starting to get a little tired of handing over their brand to another company. We'll see. For me, this is the last section, I promise. I am basically done with the usual platforms, and LinkedIn is showing its lack of value at every turn and at this point. So getting away from that one is on deck for 2026, and that'll be like the last mainstream social media platform. I mentioned that I got rid of a few years ago. Facebook, Twitter to a lesser extent, although because Facebook, like all the food truck stuff had moved over to Facebook and then over to Instagram. So Twitter, I wasn't really using too much anyway. So Twitter kind of was an easier cord to cut. Facebook, it's been a couple of years. I don't even care. So probably easier than I would have thought, but don't care. And then LinkedIn, I get less and less engagement. It's not really worthwhile. So even though it's useful to look people up, I don't know if I would stop. I don't know if I would close my account, which I still have my accounts on Twitter and Facebook, by the way. And I'll tell you why. Because if you close your account on one of those services, someone else can open an account with your name eventually, whatever the lockout period is. So to me, it's just easier to leave the account there and do nothing. And if Facebook were to come along and say, hey, you need to log into your account or we're going to close it, I'd be like, okay, I just logged in. We're good. And then I would, however long after, not. So I think, LinkedIn is probably the last of the old school that I will keep the account, but I'm not going to invite people to connect anymore. If people invite me to connect, which is rare, I will advise them that they should connect to me through email or whatever. So in my near-term future, I need to lean heavily into the, self-publishing and all that, the old stuff, the good old stuff from the good old days. All of the platforms people have come to believe are essential for human survival can be duplicated and in fact have been in the so-called Fediverse. So there's a version of most sites that you have come to rely upon with federated versions that are open source. You can deploy yourself, self-host. Can I follow your pixel-fed image feed on one of my Mastodon accounts thanks to ActivityPub? Yes. Can I self-host my own pixel-fed, which is basically like Instagram, and Mastodon servers? Yes. Can I host those platforms for particular groups of communities or communities of people like family, friends, companies, whatever? So if I could have a family-only collection of photos that we would share, yes, and you can see where this goes. You can take back control of the internet and not say, well, Instagram won't let me post this picture, but I can post it to my own server and share it with the people I want to share it with. Done. I'm getting back to hosting on my own websites, as I've mentioned. So there is a site for this audio program, for example, and while it is ugly at the moment, as I'm recording this, I really haven't touched it in the last 2 weeks. It actually works, and I think people have lost sight of function for the sake of form. This has been a substantial undoing that most don't really think about. My cell phone looks great. Actually, it's kind of boring, but look at that glass rectangle with the camera on the back and all that. Yay. Looks a lot like the one from last year. Yay. But the corners are more round or something. Who knows? But it also gives my personal information to Google every few seconds without any ability to turn that off. Oh, but it looks nice. So this is bad, and moving away from this, from that notion is critical. We should start to understand what technology is for and how it's being used more than we do. Not that my sites won't look nice. I'll get around to working on it, but people compare form and ignore function. So the fact that my websites have information that I want to publish on it, and it's completely reliable and it's there and you can get to it, but I don't like the black text on the white background. Therefore, okay, well, the thing that you were looking for is right there. If you don't want to make use of it, that's fine. So I think it's unfortunate that people judge something by the way it looks. I mean, that's a life lesson, right? Your website's ugly, therefore, but you listen to my podcast and you wanted to find out anyway. Who knows? You can't argue with that. I have a lot of stuff to work on. At the end of the day, some social networking or communicating with people I don't actually know across real and virtual distances about topics of mutual interest, or even consuming information shared by others that is interesting to me, is fine in small doses, which is why I embrace the Fediverse take on this rather than shunning all of it. I think so. I prefer the Fediverse at this point. And like I said, I tried Blue Sky. It's just Twitter with a different name with the various problems. I think social media is mostly okay. Social media, that is the sharing of video and pictures and so on. But again, you can do all that on your own. You can do PeerTube is a Fediverse take on YouTube. You can still use YouTube, but if you rely 100% on YouTube, you may find yourself in trouble. This audio program is available as a podcast on YouTube, but also Apple Podcasts, also Amazon Podcasts, also Spotify, also iHeartRadio, I think. And there's an RSS feed. So I could point that RSS feed to me and you could find it in however, it doesn't matter. So if you lock yourself into another platform, I think you could face a very unfortunate day sometime when you least expect it. So the flexibility of self-hosting, owning your own content, and then making use of these platforms is something that more people should be considering rather than, handing over your brand and hoping for the best. It sometimes doesn't go as you hope. So I think social media is mostly okay, but here again, the Fediverse take is much more in line with owning our own content, publishing it under our own control, and then sharing it or allowing it to be shared at large. But I'm not on Twitter. Good. You don't need to be. You can get this you don't have to log in, all this other stuff. Unless you want to have that, right? You get to have a say over who can access content and so on, whatever your sharing scheme is. The internet is a cool thing, but the cool parts have been taken away from us. It's time to take them back. So that's what I've come upon through my journey from probably I'm going to say 7th grade or so. 6th grade, 7th grade is when I started using technology to communicate in various ways. And it has brought me here. I don't know if that's good or bad, but anyway, you can hear I need to go have some tea or something. It's been an hour and 26 minutes of wall clock time. It's been longer than that actually. I will post-produce this, truncate some of that silence. Hopefully it'll get down to around an hour and 20. Still longer than I was thinking it would be, but that's fine. A late night episode of Quaggling Sand. We'll be back to normal after the holidays, perhaps. I didn't say which holidays, but hopefully your holidays have been great. And I hope the end of 2025 into 2026 is a vast improvement. It's hard to believe that there won't be some improvement. Fingers crossed. All right, take care. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.